Good morning, everybody. General Witch, Mr. Banerjee, John Ambassador Huntsman, Governor Huntsman. It's wonderful to be with all of you this morning. I see in front of me senior colleagues, some mentors, old friends, people with whom I worked for many, many years. And this is actually my first event after becoming Foreign Secretary, and I'm really very honored that it should be at the Vivekananda Foundation. In looking at this subject of India-US relations, partnering for peace and prosperity, and it's a relationship with which, as General Witch told you, I have had a long association. I thought a good starting point would be to recapitulate some of our history, not out of any sense of wanting to vent on grievances, but really to give you a sense of direction in terms of where the relationship is heading. And I would broadly describe the first 50 years of our relationship as one of limited convergence. I say that because I think looking back, it is very apparent that the US objective was to keep India in play as a nation, as a society, as a power, and which actually explained a lot of the economic aid policies. But doing so in a manner in which actually the US could play the rest of the region in a somewhat different direction. And you could see that in terms of the US arms assistance policies, its positions on some territorial issues which were important. And at the heart of the matter was the reality that in many ways India was marginal, sometimes irrelevant, sometimes even negative on the primary Cold War strategy of the United States. And you could see that in terms of its relationship at that time with the Soviet Union and with ideologies which were directed at the Soviet Union. I would even suggest to you at times we were considered as a card to be played vis-a-vis other powers, which meant some issues were advanced or switched off depending on the requirement of the day. And part of the problem for us was that really there were no major economic expectations of India. So India was really a society to be stabilized rather than one from which US business saw great benefits. Now, where India was concerned, there was a mirror image of this situation. You can see that in the fact that at the end of the day, there was much aid, some military cooperation, but a lot of energy addressed to managing the relationship, which was, I think, predicated on the assumption that the US had a limited capacity to do good, but a greater capacity to do harm. What it did was it created a desire not to be over-reliant on the United States. I think this I would consider to be a fair description of our past relationship. And then I would fast forward to how that has changed. I still think that today we are in the transition mode. We are moving to a phase of substantial shared interests, but it is happening in a step-by-step manner. Here, I think we should recognize the importance of symbolism. I think the position that the Clinton administration took on Kargil and President Clinton's visit was considered a big step forward, because I think it was a departure from an American posture on regional politics. The position that the Bush administration took on the nuclear deal was a further step forward, because it was a departure in terms of a global regime. Of course, it's a different matter that neither that initiative could not be followed up by either system with a sense of vigor which some people at least had hoped. And now we are actually, we just saw President Obama's visit as chief guest for the Republic Day. And I can't overstate the significance, at least the symbolic significance of his presence. Now, I would caution here that there can be two I would say, errors or dangers in how we look at the future of the relationship. If we are overly anchored on the past, then we are not going to see the opportunities and the possibilities in this relationship. At the same time, if we overstate the progress and raise expectations, then I think we do come up short in many respects, and that creates its own backlash. So I think we need to be careful in terms of progressing the relationship in exactly how we position it, how we predict, and how, in that sense, we manage it. Now, having said that, I would also state in all candor that there are some real issues between India and the United States. And rather than get into the details of those issues, I would suggest to you that there is a conceptual problem that we still have to overcome. And that is the fact that the old post-Second World War political order, world order, is still very much alive. And because it is alive in people's minds, it is today expressed in terms of deference to some powers, constraints on other powers, hostility to yet other powers, sometimes companionships with ideologies which may not be palatable to the average American, or for that matter Indian citizen. And sometimes business demands which are unrealistic and which really do not take into account the abilities of the partner. And we saw some of that expressed in the problems we have in the special 301 reports, in the section 332 hearings we had last year. So I think these are today real issues, and while I fully subscribe to all the hopes and good wishes for the relationship that I heard expressed earlier, I think it's important that we look at these issues, because if we don't, I think we will again find that there are impediments in our way. Now, so how do we go forward? And obviously the answer is to build on our commonalities, work on these differences. And I would make a few points here for your consideration. Some of them are security issues, security political issues. Some of them are much more practical business issues. I think looking at the Indo-Pacific region, it is an area where actually it's much easier to actually express our commonalities and even act on them. And I would point you to the fact that during President Obama's visit, one of the outcomes was a document called the Joint Strategic Vision, which did seek to capture the shared interest, the shared convergences that that India and the US had in the Asia-Pacific region. I think in terms of our defense cooperation, broadly it is moving in the right direction, and my sense is that from an Indian perspective today, for us, the fact that US is both a source of supplies and a military partner helps to create enough uncertainties that that could actually strengthen security in the Indo-Pacific region. But it's also clear that for the relationship to progress, India needs more economic muscle. And I readily admit that a lot of that is dependent on what we in India do to attract business, because at the end of the day, business goes where business is welcome. As a political, I would say a diplomatic posture point, or perhaps in a sense as a Paul Mill point, I would also suggest that if the American trumpet was more certain in this region, it would be helpful. A second set of events relates to the second set of issues relates to the world west of India. And clearly, I think developments which are taking place in the AFPAC region are of deep interest to us. We are watching it very closely. I think this foundation had Dr. Abdullah here just a few days ago. So I think he said much of what has to be said on this issue. A second, I would say, important element of the world west of India is what is happening between US and Iran. And the fact, I don't think there's any doubt that the strained relationship in many ways has impacted on India very negatively. So if there is a serious attempt today underway to settle this issue, it is again something which we watch with a considerable degree of hope. In terms of moving closer home, I think we still have some, I would say there clearly are some gaps between how India and the US perceive the centrality of the military and its implications on democratic politics. And moving east of India, again, I would flag our responses to the political extremism in Bangladesh as an issue where perhaps we could be on a well, our pages could come a little closer. Coming to business, I think no question that we have entered a new era because we have put behind us the challenge of attention deficit, which has plagued us in terms of US business in the past. And politically, we have removed many of the obstacles and impediments which prevent normal commerce between the two countries. Much is going to depend on how we promote in India the climate of ease of doing business. But there shouldn't be an expectation that there would be a carve-out for foreign companies. I think when Prime Minister went to the United States, that was one issue on which he was very clear, which was his view that if the overall business climate improved in India, there was no specific requirement for us to address the needs of the foreign investor. In a separate, differentiated manner. We have business problems, no question. Some of it, I think, are reasonable. Some, for example, I think the more extreme views voiced, for example, by innovator pharma companies in the US are perhaps less reasonable. The big issue for us really is how do you make the Make in India program successful, and there's the clear calculation that a more modernized India, a more industrialized India, a more urbanized India would create new demands which would give our relationship that economic heft that in which we have lagged behind. I think in terms of the economy, in terms of the potential for our technological and HR partnerships, again, one of my discoveries when I was ambassador was how much in the last few years actually American companies have got into engineering outsourcing in India. It was really, for me, a remarkable, the kind of numbers that I heard from American companies, which were very often in 5 figures in terms of the work that they get done out here, not the value of the work, but the number of people employed in that. That was to me something which came as a revelation and which pointed in a way to the direction in which we are heading. A few words about the nuclear deal. As many of you know, I think we settled some of the residual issues which arose out of a differential interpretation of the liability legislation in this country. We intend to take that forward. I think in the next few days have seminar, symposium on the nuclear, on best practices of the nuclear insurance pool. But I would, other than the bringing that initiative to fruition, I would make two big points here. One, that the removal of the nuclear issue as an obstacle has actually freed up the possibilities for cooperation in defense and space. So there has really been a larger ripple impact on the relationship. And the second, as we go today into the big negotiation for this year is going to be Paris. And if we wish in India to change the narrative from a negative narrative on emissions capping to a more positive narrative on cleaner energy and energy efficiency, I think nuclear has a very important contribution to make. A few words about defense. Again, it's been a very strong story in the last 10 years. Please bear in mind that we operate, just as one example, 3 US origin platforms, which the P-8, the C-130s, and the C-17s. And that's after a really, really long gap. I think if my memory serves me right, the last aircraft we brought probably were the C-119s. I may have missed something in between. But the DTTI has opened up new possibilities because it is clearly sending a signal today that American defense industry is willing to share technology, to co-produce, co-develop in India. And again, we are in the early stages of exploring those possibilities. There's a lot of work ahead of us. Here a point I would make to our American friends, which is that I think the US does have a lot to gain in terms of the emergence of a serious Indian defense industry. Finally, the role of PIOs. I'm not sure after the Madison Square Garden event I really need to say anything more on it, but clearly both in terms of bonding and in terms of their ability to further the relationship, I think they are a huge factor, to some extent an underexploited factor. And that is certainly one aspect that's going to get more attention from us. Our goal today as India, if I can sum up in one sentence the message which Prime Minister gave all the ambassadors when we gathered here last month, was how do you change India from a balancing power to a leading power? I think if you reflect on that goal, changing to a leading power from a balancing power, I think you would see a lot of implications, a lot of downstream possibilities. And part of that, I think, is really how do we get our relationship right, the India-US relationship right. Obviously, both sides will have to be much more innovative and much bolder about looking at the possibilities. But again, I would conclude by mentioning that at the end of the day, we need to have a different way, a different concept of the world around us and where we fit into that world. And until we get that conceptual sense right, it would be a bit of a struggle. So I think today there is an opening for global strategists once again to apply themselves to this relationship. Thank you very much for your patience. It was a delight to be with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jaishankar, for a very perspective talk. And you've covered all angles of our friendship with the US so very candidly. We are indeed grateful to you for finding your time to come to us, and we will look forward to your assisting us and helping us discharge our own kind of role, what we think with the think tanks can do in terms of assisting the governments. Well, thank you very much once again. We are indeed grateful to you. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll request you for a cup of tea, but before that, before we go, a very warm round of applause for our Foreign Secretary.